that seems like one of those questions that doesn't have an answer, and here's why. Who's judging whether it's truly a moral system?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean there? Like, how can we possibly answer this either way? Maybe
you're exactly right. I think one way you kind of could try, and we've been doing it throughout all of humanity, is to test everything and throw away what's bad, or also known as try, review, assess, adjust, hypothesize, theorize, test again. So in other words, what we're going to, try, review, revise, try again. Maybe that's a good way to put it. And then, but yeah, I like that too. But basically just and we've been doing that for a long time, but we seem to be either regressing or stuck for some time due to that debate of theism and atheism.
Try, review, adjust. We talked earlier today about NLP.
Yeah.
Bandler and Grinder, the guys who first came up with this, they found a three-part series, a three-part recipe to excellence. That was their original idea. They wanted to study excellence, and one guy was in the computer programming, and the other guy was into psychology, and they went and paid attention to some therapists because that's who they had a chance to meet and taught them. And they discovered the three steps to success. And one is to have a well-formed goal. One is to pay attention to your senses. And one is to try different stuff.
Yeah.
Even if you're not being that fancy, try something, review it, adjust. Like, obviously, the review is going to be half the battle.
And this is where, go ahead.
I was just going to say, review according to what standard, according to what goal, what's the ambition, who's the one doing the reviewing, how are they judging success? You can judge success based on the tools they're produced. You can judge success by the progress that's made toward the ultimate goal. Either one tells you sort of a different angle.
Well, so here's what I would say: it requires coming into the universe in a sense from this humble tone. But if you were to observe yourself as a being in the universe whose goal is to create more efficient systems inside of the universe, environmentally speaking, and I'm not talking about like climate change or any of the political bullcrap that comes along with the environmental challenges that we face, but I'm simply talking about acknowledging ourselves as a part of the universe that can observe it, that can respond to it, that can look back and collect information, can review that information, and can create systems based off of past tendencies for future prediction. And as those beings within the universe, which is uniquely individual, if we looked at ourselves as a responsibility to find more efficient systems within us and the environment within us and outwardly as well, that's how I think you start to craft better systems. You have to review it almost from a perspective not of how can I have a better society, but how can we as a species in general have a better relationship and a better system relationship efficiently wise with the nature and the universe around us. I think that's an important goal.
Right. So when you talk about efficiency, that's always what the economists talk about. So a more economic situation, and in terms of the history of life, this is obviously a big deal. When plants found a new way to do photosynthesis, those plants got a huge advantage, and so they kind of took over and became the primary one. So yeah, being more efficient, that's absolutely going to be a goal that we pay off, that pays off for life forms. You mentioned another one, and I'm going to use ecologic. We often judge our own behaviors in what's we call an ecological way, meaning whether it's got integrity or not, whether it's sustainable or not.
Yeah.
And that's not really a question of efficiency. That's a different question. But that's another one that we can identify as critical to life.
I think it's important to notice as a species or as beings or just people who can notice that the universe itself has a tendency of harnessing certain parts of itself, like energy-wise or efficiency-wise, that we haven't been able to replicate. But other things inside of so like you mentioned photosynthesis, for example, right? We haven't been able to, for consumption purposes, figure out ways to replicate these things, yet the universe itself, because it's there, right? We have the capacity to do that. The problem with us, I believe, is our own stubbornness to kind of yield to the universe and observe it for kind of a larger role than us. I think that we kind of, as humans, have a tendency of looking at the universe as theirs instead of the universe as a separate entity that we just kind of chill out in. And
that's what you mentioned before when you talk about flipping the tables, theism and atheism. When you talk about law and order, we're talking about the relationship maybe between us and the universe as much as when we talk about ethics and morals between us and each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Until we look at the universe as a separate entity, you can look at it as a deity or an entity. I don't give a damn. But until we look at it as something that's larger than us and that has these rules and principles baked into it, mathematically, physics, what we have to yield to breathe and walk, until we kind of take an observation of that and yield to it from the perspective of a separate deity, a separate entity, whatever it is, and then say, we have to better understand how we play a role here instead of trying to force the universe to better acclimate itself to us. That's a losing battle. And you're exactly right. That's more or less the flipping the tables part of it.
Well, there's a progression that you sort of are up against. Let's make it clear. At first, and we can even compare this. I'm gonna put a name up here, Ken Wilber. You ever heard of him?
No.
And I read some of his stuff ages and ages ago. I don't know it very well. He's one of the early transhumanists. These guys who kind of study psychology from the point of view, like a subjective point of view, really. How do we relate to the universe? And the very first thing we might talk about is one of the first things that everyone discovers is what they call their ego boundaries. You ever heard that idea?
I haven't, but I can, go on with this.
It's about age 2. The terrible twos are often the result of kids learning their ego boundaries, or so Ken Wilber would explain.
Yeah.
When you're just a baby, you don't know the difference between yourself and the universe.
Yep.
Right? There obviously your brain is picking up on these cause and effects, but for a long time you cry and you get your mom's boob, and it's just sort of automatic from the point of view of a baby who doesn't know any better.
Yeah, I was going to start this, believe it or not, with a baby analogy of the universe because of the expanding universe that we have and an expanding universe of a baby. So this is awesome that we are having this kind of randomly pop in anyway. But go on.
That's the issue, the relationship between us and the universe. And that's kind of what, education means, is losing that sort of bubble sense of you're at the center of the universe and you eventually learn your place in the universe or your relationship to the universe. And when we start talking about being good stewards of the earth, that's a complete flip. Now, we're not the thing the universe does. We're the thing the universe has.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not here just to be the outcome of the universe. We're here to help determine where it's going to happen and where it's going to go from there.
That's exactly right. And what we need to understand, and this is where I think we kind of miss, I think scientists miss the way to observe science sometimes with this. If you look at it from that perspective, it's really easy to see how the entire universe has certain structures around it that do force our orbit to be exactly in the correct way to where our life could be. And that kind of is to go along with what you're saying in a sense of we have a role in where this universe, how efficient it is and where it goes. Because the universe itself has everything crafted in a specific way. And I'm not saying that means there's a designer around it. What I'm saying is if we can see and observe how the universe is laid out mathematically to really make sure there's some kind of expanding and create, living universe, based on the placement, then our placement is there for the universe as well. Why? And I'm not saying that you have to believe in a God to figure out that question. That as a larger mass scale, the hope is if we could observe ourselves from the perspective of a role in the universe, then we would go to the universe a bit more, objectively, right? Because it's the pride, it's the subjectivity that kind of gets in the way of us having better systems. I mean, it's the right and the left fighting. It's all of these different components. That's what kind of stunts our ability to proceed. I might be missing it or rambling a bit, but you do a good job of dialing it in. So do that here.
Well, as you're rambling, I'm just sort of tracing out like this progression that sort of happened philosophically and historically. When you talk about ego boundaries, and have you ever heard the idea that during development in the womb, a creature goes through the same steps for that 9 months that our species went through during evolutionary development?
That's really interesting.
So it's a common idea in biology that's, I want to say it's oncology follows phylogeny, or ontology follows phylogeny. It means that you are created as an individual following the same steps that we were created as a species, which is why the very small fetus looks like a little creature that doesn't even have lungs, and then it turns into a fish, looks like a little shrimp, starts to look like a little mammal, and then it starts to look like an ape.
The most interesting thing about that, and while I understand there are issues still to be had with the Big Bang itself, the Big Bang, the theory, it behaves as a universe breaching the womb. So
hold on though. Here's the issue. It's possible that we follow our development of mind as an individual in the same order that we followed our development of our culture as a species. So where the individual might have ego boundaries, we might talk about people that aren't even people yet. They're still apes and unconscious. And then as we get older, we realize this universe is this place that we all share. And that's when we might first have what we might call sapiens. And then way back when, I want to say like 4000 BC, basically everyone had this idea that we were basically God's slaves and the earth was his plantation. It was our job to, grow the food and the people and look after the animals. And it's not really clear when it started to happen, but there was like this sort of libertine sense that developed that the universe might be like, for us to have fun with. It wasn't really God's universe, it's our universe.
Yeah, it's like a wild card in Uno.
A little bit. Or it's just a dawning awareness of our own free will, our own abilities.
Yeah.
And I don't know who...
Choice. It's almost like the insertion of choice, the conscious awareness of choice within the universe, right?
Yes. Or within the culture.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden we're not God's slaves, but the earth is our slave. That's kind of a different story. And then and it's been a while, not that long, historically. But now we have people saying, well, no, the universe isn't our playground. The universe is the world is our life support. Like we can't just mess it up while we're messing this up. And that was Buckminster Fuller's idea, the Earth as a spaceship. And that's a level of predetermination that's relatively new in the culture. I think a lot of the individuals are pretty aware of it. But there's a real issue with when you talk about world building, there's these global problems that no one really knows what to do about them. And the only thing people think of is those two that we go back to, right? Well, if you're not sure how to fix the world, let's just ask God.
Yeah.
Or let's just ask whoever has the biggest weapons. Is that really the best way?
Here's where both of these arguments always can be crippled, in my opinion. And it's this. If you can take the ideology and point to a time and frame that it was used from a sense of power to do the opposite of what that ideology espouses today, then it probably shouldn't be trusted in power again. And that might sound a little harsh, but my point, what I'm saying by that is, it's not that what your idea is isn't good. It's not that your idea of atheism isn't necessarily a good idea. I can appreciate your concept of it. And it's not that your idea of like this kind of theological belief structure, even, I mean, we're going to talk more about Paul, and my affinity for Paul, how much I actually appreciate him. But even in Paul, he had some things in his writings to the churches that have been manipulated, in my belief, and other people could likely believe he intentionally manipulated for power there. So what you have is these two ideologies that either are capable of being manipulated, have been manipulated, and in those manipulations killed millions, right? So we should be able to easily throw those out. Why can't we? And I'm not saying you're throwing out the relationship with God if you believe in God, and I'm not saying you're throwing out the relationship with the structure of naturalism or materialism. I'm saying you're throwing out the belief that either of these two things can have a dominating world powerly impact over the universe we're in. That doesn't make any sense at this point, because every time it happens, you have a situation where millions of people die. And so that's where, and I'm not saying, this is, what about no borders, all this shit. We can worry about more of the structural stuff here. This is more of the theism, atheism part of it, where we should be able to agree on, regardless of countries or whatever, we should be able to agree on these two ideologies from a power structure and societies did not actually effectively work over time. That's something.
Let's talk about why, because you kind of made it, you kind of intimated there, and we didn't flesh that out. It seems like they always do get co-opted. And
That's
we
it.
talked a long time ago about how Buddhism kind of got around that because it was so popular and promulgated by guys who didn't have any power. It wasn't worth the effort for the princess to go chase down these homeless monks and make them conform. So they didn't, and their oral tradition preserved, basically untouched, which is why we know that these princes tried to hack and co-opt Buddhism.